For a fake HOA cops accused black man of faking pain, he was a retired SWAT trainer. The morning sun spilled over the manicured lawns of Sterling Heights, a gated community where every hedge was trimmed to perfection and every mailbox bore the same shade of taupe. At the heart of the neighborhood stood a modest ranch-style house, its brick facade adorned with a single American flag fluttering in the breeze. This was the home of Marcus Reed, a 55-year-old black man whose quiet presence belied a life of courage and sacrifice. Marcus had retired 5 years ago after 2 decades as a SWAT trainer for the city's police department, a career that left him with a limp, a chest full of medals, and a deep well of patience. Marcus's days were now filled with simple pleasures, tending to his vegetable garden, reading military history on his porch, and mentoring kids at the local community center. His limp, the result of a training accident that shattered his knee, slowed him down but never stopped him. He moved with a cane, his steps deliberate, his eyes sharp with the instincts of a man who'd faced danger and come out stronger. To his neighbors, though, Marcus was an enigma, a man who didn't fit their polished world of book clubs and Pilates classes. Sterling Heights was governed by the Sterling Heights Homeowners Association, a council led by Pamela Thornton, a woman in her late 40s whose charm masked a hunger for control. Pamela had moved to the neighborhood a decade ago, escaping a corporate job that had burned her out. She found purpose in enforcing the HOA's bylaws, her clipboard a scepter, her smile a weapon. To her, Sterling Heights was a sanctuary of order, and she'd do anything to keep it that way, even if it meant targeting those who didn't conform. Pamela's brainchild was the Sterling Guardians, a volunteer patrol of residents who roamed the neighborhood in electric carts, wearing neon vests and calling themselves HOA cops. Their mission was to enforce the HOA's rules, catching kids riding bikes on sidewalks, finding residents for unapproved flower beds, and reporting suspicious behavior. The Guardians were Pamela's eyes and ears, and they relished their power. None more than Derek Walsh, a former car salesman with a chip on his shoulder and a knack for confrontation. Marcus had little patience for the HOA. He'd bought his house outright after retiring, drawn to Sterling Heights for its quiet streets, not its politics. He paid his taxes, kept his lawn neat, and ignored the HOA's endless newsletters about community standards. His independence grated on Pamela, who saw his refusal to attend HOA meetings as defiance. She'd drive by his house during her patrols, her eyes lingering on his garden, where tomatoes and collards grew in defiance of the neighborhood's obsession with ornamental shrubs. To her, Marcus was a problem waiting to be solved. Trouble brewed on a sweltering July afternoon. Marcus was in his front yard, kneeling awkwardly to pull weeds, his cane propped against a tree. The pain in his knee flared, a familiar ache that came with humid days. He grimaced, steadying himself, when a Sterling Guardians cart pulled up. Derek stepped out, flanked by a woman named Karen, her phone already recording. "You okay there?" Derek asked, his tone laced with mockery. "Looks like you're struggling." Marcus glanced up, his jaw tight. "I'm fine, just gardening." Karen tilted her head, her voice dripping with false concern. "You sure? You're making quite a show of it. We've had complaints about loitering." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "This is my yard, I'm not loitering." Derek smirked, stepping closer. "We're just doing our job. People see you out here, groaning and limping, and they get worried. Maybe you're exaggerating that injury for attention." The accusation hit Marcus like a slap. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane, his voice low but steady. "I trained men to save lives while you were selling used cars. Don't talk to me about faking pain." Derek's face reddened, but he doubled down. "Watch your tone, buddy. We're the ones keeping this place safe." That evening, a letter arrived at Marcus's house, accusing him of disorderly conduct and misrepresenting physical condition to elicit sympathy. It demanded he cease disruptive behavior or face fines and further action. Marcus read the letter twice, his hands steady but his chest tight with anger. He'd faced worse: hostile crowds, armed suspects, even racial slurs during his career. But this was different. This was his home, his sanctuary, and they were attacking his integrity. He drove to the HOA office the next morning, his cane tapping on the polished floor. Pamela was there, her smile as brittle as glass. "Mr. Reed, this is about community welfare," she said, barely glancing at the letter. "Your behavior is unsettling residents. My behavior, Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with steel. I was gardening. You're accusing me of faking a disability I've had for 15 years. Pamela shrugged. We have reports. If you can't comply, we'll escalate this. Marcus left, his mind racing. He dug out his medical records, x-rays, surgical reports, even a letter from his former captain praising his service. He sent copies to the HOA, expecting an apology. Instead, a second letter arrived. This one threatening to lien his property if he didn't pay a $1,500 fine for noncompliance. The harassment intensified. The Sterling Guardians began circling his house daily, their carts buzzing like vultures. They'd park across the street, snapping photos of Marcus as he watered his plants or walked to his mailbox. Derek would lean out, shouting, "Still putting on a show, Reed?" Neighbors started whispering, their glances turning cold. At the HOA's monthly meeting, Pamela painted Marcus as a troublemaker, a man exploiting his alleged injury to flout rules. He's disrupting our harmony, she told the crowd, her voice trembling with feigned concern. Most residents nodded, their fear of outsiders outweighing their curiosity about Marcus's truth. But not everyone was convinced. Jamal Carter, a 30-year-old teacher who'd moved to Sterling Heights a year ago, had met Marcus at the community center, where Marcus volunteered to coach basketball. Jamal admired Marcus's quiet strength, the way he'd encourage kids without raising his voice. At the HOA meeting, Jamal stood up, his arms crossed. Have you seen his medical records? He asked Pamela. He's a retired SWAT trainer. You're accusing a hero of lying. Pamela's smile faltered. We're addressing documented concerns, Mr. Carter. Let's not sensationalize. Jamal wasn't swayed. He visited Marcus the next day, bringing a thermos of coffee. They're out of line, he said, sitting on Marcus's porch. What can I do? Marcus sighed, his eyes tracing the flag in his yard. Just keep asking questions, Jamal. Truth's all I need. The HOA's campaign grew uglier. Flyers appeared around the neighborhood, warning of a disruptive resident causing public disturbances. Someone spray-painted "Faker" on Marcus's driveway. Late at night, he'd hear footsteps near his fence, followed by the clatter of rocks tossed into his yard. Each incident tested his patience, but Marcus refused to break. He hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Anita, who specialized in civil rights cases. Anita warned that the HOA was likely fabricating complaints to justify their actions, banking on Marcus's race and disability to paint him as a threat. They're playing a dangerous game, Anita said. They think you'll back down because you're tired. Prove them wrong. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. I've never backed down from a fight. I re-nerve, and I will one. The breaking point came on a crisp October evening. Marcus was in his backyard, harvesting tomatoes, when 3 Sterling Guardians appeared, led by Derek. They stepped onto his property, ignoring the no trespassing sign nailed to his gate. You're done, Reed, Derek said, his voice loud enough to carry across the yard. We're reporting you for fraud. Sheriff's coming to sort this out. Marcus stood, his cane steady, his voice calm. You're on my property. Leave now, or I'll call the real police. Derek laughed, stepping closer. You don't scare me, old man. Keep faking that limp, and we'll see who's laughing. What Derek didn't know was that Jamal had been watching from his car, parked just down the street. He'd grown suspicious of the Guardians' tactics and had started documenting their patrols. Now he pulled out his phone and hit record, capturing every word. As Derek loomed over Marcus, Jamal stepped out, his voice cutting through the tension. Back off, he said, holding up his phone. This is going online if you don't leave. Derek froze, his face paling. The other Guardians hesitated, their bravado crumbling. Before anyone could respond, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing. Sheriff Lopez, a woman who'd trained under Marcus years ago, stepped out. She took one look at the scene and shook her head. Derek, what are you doing? Lopez asked, her tone sharp. He's faking an injury, Derek stammered, pointing at Marcus. He's a nuisance. Lopez sighed, pulling out her notepad. Marcus Reed trained half the department, including me. His injury's documented, and this is his property. You're the ones causing trouble. The Guardians retreated, muttering excuses as they piled into their cart. Jamal uploaded the video to X that night, titling it, Fake HOA Cops Harass Retired SWAT Trainer. By morning, it had millions of views with comments flooding in from veterans, police officers, and civil rights advocates. Local news picked up the story, and reporters camped outside Marcus's house, eager for his perspective. Pamela tried to spin the narrative, issuing a statement claiming the HOA had been misled by inaccurate reports. But the damage was done. Residents began questioning her leadership, and a petition to disband the Sterling Guardians gained traction. Jamal organized a community meeting at the local library where Marcus spoke for the first time in public. He stood with his cane, his voice steady as he shared his story, his service, his injury, and the harassment he'd endured. "I didn't fight for this country to be treated like a criminal in my own home," he said, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "You judged me before you knew me. That's not community, that's cowardice." The room erupted in applause, even from those who'd believed Pamela's lies. Pamela, cornered by the backlash, resigned as HOA president, her reputation in ruins. The HOA issued a formal apology and paid for the damages to Marcus's property, though no amount could erase the indignity he'd faced. In the weeks that followed, Sterling Heights changed. The Sterling Guardians were dissolved, replaced by a volunteer group focused on neighborly support. Jamal and other residents helped Marcus expand his garden, turning it into a community plot where kids learned to plant seeds. Marcus, once a stranger, became a mentor, his porch a gathering place for those seeking his wisdom. As spring bloomed in Sterling Heights, Marcus sat on his porch, watching the flag sway. His knees still ached, but his heart was lighter, unburdened by the weight of prejudice. He'd faced the storm with the same resolve that had carried him through his career, not with fists, but with truth. And in doing so, he changed a neighborhood that had forgotten what it meant to see a man for who he was, not what they feared him to be.